SMB Investor with Nick Bryant and Sean Smith.
Hey everyone, you got Sean Smith here, managing partner at Search Fund Ventures and CEO of SMB Investor Network. And today I'm joined by Christian Ruf, who's founded Uncommon Elite, a very unique and a great kind of executive search firm placing really top quality talent in the independent sponsor and kind of small business acquisition market. So I'll let Christian talk a little bit about his firm and also how investors can think more about vetting the team that they're backing.
Well, Sean, man, thanks for having me. And thanks for initially reaching out. Glad we were able to find some time. I'll just give really as high level as I can go without going into too much of the details. Backgrounds in military, spent some time in special operations community flying helicopters for a very small unit that provides mostly assault and attack support to tier one operators. Tier one operators you can consider bin Laden raid type guys, and did that. And then I somehow got recruited by a firm that was very similar to mine to go run an urgent care during COVID. And so I got to learn very quickly about what it is to actually take what you do from the special operations community and apply it to a small business during a time where everybody and their brother wanted to be in an urgent care. And fast forward 3 years, I've sort of transitioned. Well, I have transitioned into similar to what that search firm did. Was I take guys from the special operations community, SEALs, Green Berets, CAG, Rangers, CS, some Air Force and Marine special operators, and I place them in businesses. And really, we do two types of placements. One would be that integrator style COO operations manager for a small business, and the other is that GM president CEO of a larger and more robust business that requires a high degree of both leadership and financial acumen, as well as the ability to just get it and figure it out.
Thank you for that background. What would you say kind of the common traits are across special operations folks, right? There's that, that high degree of adaptability and kind of leadership skill sets, I imagine, that are a pretty common thread. But what else do you see that has generally positioned folks to be, a great fit for running small businesses?
Two things. The first would be tenacity. The sheer absolute tenacity of here's the objective and there's a limited amount of resources and they just got to go figure it out. I think back to there was a week when I was at the organization I was at where we had 3 aircraft in Iraq just on a regular deployment. We always had crews deployed doing direct action strikes against ISIS type guys. We had 3 aircraft there. We had 3 aircraft that were sending out to Virginia Beach to work with Naval Special Warfare Development Group, also referred to as SEAL Team 6. And then we had 3 aircraft that we were sending to Colorado to just do some internal training. And the total number of aircraft that we had at the time, I can't give specifics as a number, but I can tell you it's less than a baker's dozen. And so you have a force that's already dispersed, a lot of different operations going on. And we came into the office on Monday and guess what? White House pressed a button and there was a hostage that the U.S. had been searching for about 8 years, who popped her head up in some place. And all of a sudden we were redirecting aircraft there because hostage shows up. We're going to go get it. Not going to wait. So we launched a cruise to go do that. And then that night, a small team of Green Berets, I believe it was in Chad. It was either Chad or Niger, were ambushed. And they're ambushed by the terrorist organization over there. One guy was still unaccounted for. And so what did we do? Redirected aircraft over there. And so you're working with a limited amount of resources with multiple different objectives, communication across 4 different continents. And you're left with really nothing else than we have to figure this out because we're not going to wait to go rescue a hostage, or we're not going to go wait to go discover where one of our guys was. So the tenacity part is pretty significant. I think the other part, and this is a misconception about the military often, is that the military is very rigid, very disciplined. You bark orders, you get the things you want. And if you act or behave like that in special operations community, it's the fastest way to get kicked out. It's very much a big boy rules. Everybody plays at the top of their game. Expectations are made clear, but there isn't that rigidity. It's more of a high degree of emotional intelligence of, all right, Christian's one of our new guys, and now he's faced with this predicament where we're having to throw people all over the world. Like, what do we do to equip Christian to be successful? Rather than just like park in some order and expectation, it's a very, very high degree of a team environment, and that's what, like, we place guys in businesses and industries they've never been in before, and they just have to come in, get buy-in, and lead the team. And you don't get that by barking orders.
Yeah, no, that's a great to clear that up for folks who I think might have, had the view that, yeah, when you're the leader, you're telling people what to do and it's my way or the highway. But that kind of,
well, it's like, yeah, Full Metal Jacket and Platoon certainly have set a different stage as far as like the rigidity around it. But in real life, you act like that. That's the first way to destroy your career.
yeah, and it's the same. The same kind of concept goes for a lot of the businesses that folks are acquiring. I mean, you come into an HVAC business or a plumbing business, and you're not a licensed plumber. If you start barking orders at people and telling them exactly what they need to be doing, that's a pretty fast way to lose respect.
Yeah,
There's definitely, I think some folks call it servant leadership is generally a pretty good approach. It sounds like that's kind of similar in concept to what you're talking.
Yeah, it's balancing a line between, I call it compassion and tenacity. And truly effective leaders coming out of those types of organizations, they have the ability to have empathy and compassion for their individuals. They understand what makes them click. They understand what motivates them. They understand how to coach them. Everybody has a different style of learning. Everybody requires a different style of coaching. And so establishing that relationship and that familiarity and bringing compassion, like knowing about them, about their families, about their lives, that's the way that you go in and you start to get that high degree of trust and high degree of like Captain Ruff's going to figure it out for us. And then you blend that with the tenacity piece of, hey, expectations are crystal clear and we're not going to waver of them. So like, we can be friends and we can have a close relationship, but let's not confuse relationship with expectations. And so
That's great.
guys that can do that coming from those communities are successful in everything they do.
And, is the assumption, because you've been so close to special operations, kind of the culture and, who's successful there, is sort of the, assumption that anyone you're bringing in who has that background is going to possess those two kind of characteristics? Or are you doing work as well to kind of vet and ensure that the folks you're placing, live up to those standards?
I would say I don't want to put a blanket statement on it because, you have variability in individuals across really any different type of organization. But I would say that, all these special operations teams, so 160th, CAG, SEALs, they all have an assessment process and they're all very different. Mine was 10 days. SEALs have a couple weeks. Rangers they got Ranger School and they have another couple weeks thing. So they vary in length and they vary in content, but the one thing that remains true is they're looking for attributes. I finished last in my flight school class. Last in my flight school class. I had maybe 350 hours, of which 50 are at night. And I was assessing for the number one helicopter unit in the world where all you do is fly at night. And all you do is really hard technical things in high risk environments with no resources. And I'm sitting there at the assessment, looking at these guys and wondering what on God's earth am I doing here? And I made it. And looking back at it, it took some time, took about 2 years until I was in a leadership position to realize oh, we could train somebody to fly. Sean, I could take you out. We could go out into a Bell Jet Ranger, which is a little news helicopter. And if you give me 14 and a half hours, I can teach you how to hover. Maybe
it might
plus
take
or
more than
minus
that
an
for
hour.
me, but
No, 14 and a half hours, man. Give me 14 and a half hours and I can teach you how to hover. I'd bet 10 grand on it, man. Because
I'm
you
going
can
to
teach a
take you
monkey
up on
to fly.
that next.
I'm okay. Now this is recorded. I'm really screwed.
Exactly.
But I can't teach someone tenacity. I can't teach someone integrity. I can't teach someone how to connect with somebody else. I can't teach somebody to lead. And so when you start to get in those environments, we put guys through an 8-month program and we had a pretty much like a 95% success rate that we could take a guy, baseline, like knows how to hover an aircraft, and turn him into one of the best helicopter pilots in the world. And we could do it over and over and over again. But we weren't teaching leadership, and we weren't teaching tenacity and attributes and the ability to rally a team around something that they don't want to do. And so when I think about what the situations I'm putting these guys in, and I've had guys that taken over $50 million HVAC businesses and like they don't know what to do with a wrench, but they know how to lead. And so when I consider the type of guys I'm putting forward, fortunately, like most of the vetting has already been done because they wouldn't have gotten to where they were without that ability to have that set of attributes, lead people with compassion, but also be unwavering in expectations.
Yeah, that it's a great filter, and you're obviously, really well networked in that sphere. I guess one kind of, way to kind of apply those concepts potentially for some of the folks listening would be, say you a lot of that vetting hadn't already been done by virtue of the folks that you're placing. What would you recommend kind of the top 3 to 5, ways people can suss out those attributes would be as they're talking to a sponsor or a searcher or someone else on a leadership team?
So we're saying like, how would you apply those same principles to you're vetting somebody who's not military?
Right. So, basically going back to the actual special operations vetting process itself, how can you take those special operations tactics and bring them here?
Yeah. So Graham Weaver, who is the, he heads up Alpine, big PE fund. He had a really interesting article on it, which like when I read it, I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what we do. It's just now it's just through a different lens. And he shows a graph and it's attributes versus experience. And it shows that over time, performance of assessing the performance of someone you assess based off experience is going to generally go down. But over time, the performance of someone who you assess based off of attributes is generally going to go up. So when I'm coaching, because I also do some executive coaching with small business owners, entrepreneurs, when I'm coaching them on like, all right, so maybe you can't afford to go hire a Navy SEAL to be your operations manager, but that doesn't inhibit you from looking through the lens of attributes. How are you going to do that? Well, the first thing is that like any of those personality assessments, culture index, DISC, all of those are useful tools, but they're not the answer. So where I see people get it wrong is they like give somebody a culture index and that culture index comes back as some like letter. I don't remember. And they're like, oh, great. This is exactly what we need. And they make their decision based off that. And that is your first step towards failure because you're using somebody else's test to make your assessment rather than creating a layer. So the baseline principle is that any hiring process needs to be a series of processes. Think of like a birthday cake that stacks on each other to give you that full picture. The more layers you have in the process, the more you'll be able to suss out who is really the individual. One of the questions that I really like to ask or coach my clients on asking is imagine you're in a line at a Starbucks and there's a guy in front of you. He goes and he pays, he's just getting coffee. He goes and he pays for his coffee. And at Starbucks, like you order and they bring it over the other counter, they, put a little heart and smiley face on your cup and you get your coffee and you're good to go. Well, imagine there's a guy in front of you and you clearly hear him and see him pay for a coffee. He's going to go over there and then he looks down and has like one of those, perfect bars. They're like the refrigerated peanut butter bars or whatever. And he just grabs one and takes it and goes and gets his coffee. And like, oh, you didn't pay for that. What do you do? I've never gotten the same answer to that. Everybody's going to come up with something different. I've had guys say like, oh, it's not my business. I'm not going to say anything. Like, it's not my business. That's his thing. It's actually not my business. It's not my responsibility if someone's stealing or not. I've guys said that like, I'm going to get out of line, go over to the dude, tap him on the shoulder, look him in the face. It's like, you get paid for that? And then I've had ones that say like, I'm going to bring it to the attention of the barista. But there's no right answer, there's no correct answer, and there's no singular answer. And I've probably asked that question 40 times and still don't get the same thing. But what it tells you is how they think. It tells you is like, okay, in face of a situation where there's a little bit of uncertainty of what to do and there's integrity involved, what's the action? And that's going to inform it does a better job of informing what are the baseline what are the baseline attributes this person has. Because if they're going to go over to the dude and tap the person on the shoulder and say, yo, dude, are you going to pay for that? Okay, well, we know that they have a high standard for integrity, not only for themselves but for others. They're ambitious and they're driven because they're going to get out there, and there's not really much holding them back.
It's a great question. It reminds me of kind of the sell me this pen question from Wolf of Wall Street, right? It's sort of put someone on the spot, cuts through all the potential for, oh, my greatest weakness is, that I work too hard. Yeah. That's really interesting.
But it's like, Sean, tell me about a time you had integrity. And what you're going to tell me is about a time that you had integrity, whether or not it's true or not. Like, are you embellishing it? I don't know. How do I go find out? I wasn't there. But if you put them in a situation where they're forced to think about it and make a decision on the spot, it's going to give you a better indicator.
Yeah. And to your point, I'm just thinking about it myself. If I had been sitting in an interview with you getting asked that question, it would definitely create sort of an uncomfortable but raw, outcome. Much more raw than, like you said, if you had asked me, tell me about a time you had integrity.
Yeah.
So that's a great concept, though. So for folks, that are evaluating a leader or a sponsor or searcher, someone they're backing, kind of taking that same concept, how can you ask the question like, tell me about a time you had integrity, or tell me about a common one is, tell me about your leadership experience, right? How big of teams have you led? How can you take those questions and package them up almost into a scenario that forces people to show more than they're going to tell or potentially embellish? Very interesting.
Yeah, I think baseline, what you need to understand, and this is like, I get a lot of job descriptions, and job descriptions are largely worthless to me. It's like a resume, bunch of words that somebody puts on a piece of paper that tries to convey something but really doesn't get to the heart of the person. And so job descriptions are the flip side of that. When someone comes to me and they're like, I need a president for this HVAC company, the first question I ask is, all right, if you had to define 3 to 5 outcomes that will make this person successful in 12 months and give you that, like, oh yeah, like, we made the right hire, what are those outcomes? And you get varying ones for the same position at different companies. You end up getting you get different outcomes, different levels of ownership. And I ask that question because I want to understand, okay, what are those outcomes? What are those expectations? How are you going to measure them? And then what are the attributes in a person that are going to make them successful at that? Like a VP of sales role is a lot different than a COO. Like some COOs, like, okay, maybe they're a little bit, they're not as outgoing, but they're highly organized. And I would rather have a COO that's not as outgoing, but is like highly organized, understands KPIs, and knows how to hold people accountable, than I would one that's like a huge extrovert, but can't hold people to a strategy. And similar with sales, like, do I want somebody who's personable, can go establish relationships? And like, if they suck at organization, fine. Like, let's go figure out a way to complement it. I'd rather someone go out and hunt and bring in business and then figure out the organizational piece somewhere else. But I'm not going to hire a VP of sales that is an introvert. And so I think about, right, what are those outcomes? What are the attributes that make those outcomes, that make somebody successful? And then that's where I go and vet people. And you don't need to have a Navy SEAL or a Green Beret to do that. You just need to have an understanding of what are the attributes I'm going to look for in an individual that are make them successful in this role. And then define scenarios and questions and how you peer into references based off of those attributes.
That's great feedback. Yeah, I think, more and more the kind of narrative in the small business acquisition space, both for kind of the individual buying the business and for just the leadership team more broadly, is that, the leaders of this business in many cases are just a lot more critical than the actual business itself. You've got the kind of horse and the jockey, and I've talked about this on, a bunch, but when you've got a big publicly traded company, of course, there's a lot of momentum and inertia behind that business. And for any one person on the leadership team, even the entire leadership team, it's like moving an aircraft carrier, right? But when you've got these small businesses, one person can move that very swiftly. And so you got to have that right group and identify those right attributes. So I think for investors, it's becoming more and more topical, and understanding and creating really disciplined frameworks for evaluating folks is key.
Yeah, I use myself as an example a lot because I went from leading a team of 70 special operators and a bunch of aircraft, going to doing things all over the world, and then the next day I was running urgent cares during COVID. I didn't know how to spell P&L. I had never come up with a budget. Knew nothing about accounting. I also knew nothing about urgent cares,
Yeah, healthcare.
like CPT codes and billing and EMRs and really like marketing and ICP and all of that. But the problems are all the same: people, accountability, expectations, focus, organization. And so it took me probably 2 to 3 months to get a grasp on okay, like P&L, what are you supposed to do with it? What does it mean? What are the levers to pull? Like it's money, but it's budgeting, and it's having insights on KPIs and where to make cuts and where to add and where to lean into. And so it took me about 3 months to go and figure that out and become familiar enough with the industry that I could start making decisions, start opening service lines. We opened another 2 locations. COVID certainly helped with that. But when I put guys in opportunities or roles where they have no industry experience, to me, it's irrelevant. At one point, I was 26 years old, and I inherited a team of 32 guys that were 20 years my senior and had 4,000 flight hours more than me on average. Had been fighting this war for 20 years at a very high level, and I was the guy in charge. And you just have to get in. These guys can get in, adapt quickly, figure it out, and then do what they know best, and that's lead.
So what are kind of maybe 3 or so examples of some placements you've either been working on or that you've made recently that you think are just perfect fits? Maybe even some, commentary on how they're going, to the degree you can share, things like that.
Yeah, but my favorite is my first one, not because it was my first one, but because it's just a incredible example. About 2 years ago, I placed a guy in a business, SEAL Team 6 operator, sniper team leader. He had run their green team, which is basically like their training pipeline as well. Went on, got his MBA from MIT, and then they plopped him in as president of a $25 million a year solar business. And it had there's a lot of hair on it in many different ways. And he got in and just figured it out. And 2 years later, the business is in a far better position than it was then. One role that I recently did that was a very exciting one for me was a $30 million a year landscaping company in New York. And the owner came to me and said, give me somebody who has 0 industry experience and 0 post-military experience. I'm like, oh, interesting. Tell me more. He's like, I just want a special operator. And he had some context. He had greater context to what that actually meant. So he found a guy who'd been a Green Beret for 20 years, no post-military experience, nothing out landscaping. And now he's the CEO of a $30 million a year business. And then I think further down the line, you start get to more of intermediary operational type roles. An example of one that we did. Yeah, we just did an integrator. If you're familiar with EOS and traction, there's that integrator profile. And we did one for a home services business. Our business, $4 million in revenue, but the leader had really kind of hit his ceiling and was kind of unsure of how to lead beyond that, and couldn't fully do the day-to-day, but also the strategic things that he wanted to do. And so we found him a guy, West Point grad, gone to be a platoon leader in Ranger Regiment, which is a very high position, very hard, very, very, very hard to get there. It's almost, I'd argue it's harder to become a platoon leader in the Ranger Regiment than it is to be a SEAL Team 6 operator. And his first post-military MBA thing is now going to be like the number 2 guy at this home services business. And he's going to crush it. He's going to show up, high degree of organization, high degree of accountability, and insert the things and structure that needs to take that business to the next level.
Very neat. Those all sound great, and congrats on kind of the success you've had and building things up so
Yeah, it's been
quickly.
fun. The success is driven by the quality of the talent. I just happen to be that conduit. So, like, I don't I don't do much other than I don't do much other than like find these high quality dudes that have proven themselves already and find like the great opportunities for them. So the success, we've done 27 placements in the last 4 months, and the success of that is completely and wholeheartedly driven by the quality of the individuals.
Would you say kind of that just at the most generic level, that integrator kind of role is a common ask that you get and a good fit for the folks that you're placing?
Yeah, so on the smaller side, yeah, it's an incredible fit for really any guy coming out of that community, especially if this is their first thing. I mean, that's what I was as an integrator at the urgent care practice. So that, like, I love getting those because I'm really looking for raw attributes at that point. When someone comes to me and says, "Hey, I need a CEO of this HVAC company," I'm looking for, yeah, I'm looking for attributes, but I am also looking for, all right, since you've gotten out, what have you done and what are the results you've provided? Like, have you got one right now? It's an HVAC company, larger HVAC company, and one of the profiles the candidates were putting up for it is he's been a Green Beret for 15 years as a commander. So he's got the leadership chops. But he's also been running a roofing business that he took from 30 million in revenue to 150 million in revenue, and all the marketing and financial acumen and HR and all those other skills of what it takes to be like a business leader. He has them, and now he's just taking it to that next level to which, that business can say like, all right, we're giving this dude the keys. We're going to give him an objective. We're going to give him left and right limits, and then we're going to get out of the way. And some of those, like, there is no time for the coaching. There is no time for the hand holding. And they want someone who's a proven leader based off of their background, but also a proven business operator. And so for me, those get really exciting because it opens the breadth of like what we can do. We have a roll up in a home services entity where the CEO, they're PE backed, came to me and said, we have all these GM positions and we have these VP of value creation, VP of M&A, and VP of talent. And I want special operators in every single one of those roles. Okay. Right. And so now we're taking guys who have worked on the M&A integration, value creation side of PE and putting them in a bigger, put them on a bigger train, and watching those guys like take what is an already flourishing platform to, triple it in the next 2 years.
That's neat. And that's great I mean, what a great way to kind of create that culture throughout the organization, right? If you're placing
Yeah.
all the way across the VP level for all those different roles,
Yeah.
that's going to just
Yeah.
flow right through.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's keeping us busy too. So, yeah, that's great, man.
Very cool. Well, look, anything you want to kind of close off with, how people can get in touch with you, things like that?
Yeah, I'm largely very active on Twitter and LinkedIn. Business's name is Uncommon Elite. Feel free to reach out any one of those channels. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, man. Like, I think there's a really cool opportunity going on in the SMB world right now, even amongst like the veteran searchers, because I think there should be more of them. I just don't know that they have had the exposure to what that means, like what it means to go and buy. Like, I had no idea. And so it's interesting to think about like how can you bring more of those guys to this market that will be successful in that.
Yeah, it's a good thought exercise, and definitely very worthy of pursuit, I think. We've seen a handful of folks that have a military experience and seem to be really well positioned, more so than folks coming from other backgrounds in the space. So I agree.
Yeah. And the cool part is like I'm now starting to get into that world of veterans who have gone out in businesses and are now calling me because they're like, yeah, I want my number 2 to be somebody from my background. I'm like, all right, you got the dream team, man.
Very nice. Great. Well, thanks so much, Christian.
You bet, dude. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.